friends. My name is Nick Clementson, Director of Worship here at Grace Lutheran, and welcome back to What to Watch For in Worship. I'm here in my home studio this week where I have my practice organ, and I do much of my practicing and other work from home during the week. This Sunday is, of course, Reformation Sunday. It's the day we celebrate the coming of the Protestant Reformation. Which is usually considered to have started in 1517 when Martin Luther published his 95 Theses, which was a document listing plans to reform what Luther considered corruption in the Catholic Church, especially as it related to the authority of clergy to be able to forgive sins via the selling of indulgences, among many other grievances, all of which could really be the subject of another video. But the Reformation was transformative in many ways, including musical. And as this new branch of the church began to form, the Lutheran church musician started to develop and evolve. And it's likely the most famous Lutheran church musician of all time was Johann Sebastian Bach, who lived from 1685 to 1750. And while he was a church musician his entire life, his primary work in the church began in 1723 when he was appointed cantor at the St. Thomas Church, the Thomaskirche, in Leipzig, which is a position he would hold for 27 years. Bach wrote organ music that can generally be classified into two types. The first are what are called his free works. These are his preludes, his fugues, toccatas, his fantasy. Well, I guess a fugue isn't really a free work, but that's neither here nor there. But the second group are his chorale preludes, which are organ pieces based on chorale melodies. His most famous example of a chorale prelude is likely his prelude on Wachet auf, which is usually heard during Advent. Far and away, though, his most famous free work today is the Toccata and Fugue in D minor, which you heard the opening bars of at the beginning of this video. In more recent years, the authenticity of this piece has been called into question, specifically whether or not Bach even wrote it. We do not have a copy of it in Bach's hand. The earliest manuscript we have was penned by Johannes Rinck, who is a mid-18th century German organist. The scholarship is unclear whether or not Rinck and Bach knew each other. I don't think they did, but Rinck was a student of another organist, Johann Peter Kellner, who knew Bach very well and was a pupil of Bach's. Rinck's copy of the Toccata and Fugue is likely a copy of something related to something Kellner had, whether it's an actual physical copy or whether it was an aural, A-U-R-A-L, aural recollection of Kellner's playing. Now, I am no musicologist, but I don't think there can be a doubt that this Toccata and Fugue were written by Bach. Notice my air quotes there. I say written because this appears to have many features that would be characteristic of an improvisation that Bach would perform. It's hard to dive too deep into this without getting too heavy on the music theory side of things, but I wanted to share an example that will hopefully demonstrate why I feel this piece was actually an improvisation that was written down later. Bach wrote organ music for many reasons. First, he wrote some enormous, expansive organ preludes and fugues that were technical showpieces, likely for himself to play. These were earlier in his career when he was more of a performer than a church musician. So I'll play for you now the first few bars of one of these very complex fugues. This is the fugue in A minor. Notice how complex this fugue subject is. It's a musical sequence that descends, and it may sound kind of rather innocent, but trust me when I say it's extremely complex and very involved, especially when other voices are added. Bach also wrote organ music for pedagogical or teaching purposes, and the most famous of these that are attributed to him are what are called the 8 little preludes and fugues. It should be pointed out here that the authenticity of those are also called into question, and it's actually quite convincing. They're likely not Bach's originals. But regardless, it was common practice for Bach to compose music for the beginner student organist. And this is a different fugue in A minor from that collection that has a far less complex subject. So, we've heard two examples, one by Bach, the virtuoso organist performer, and one by, maybe not by him, but characteristic of Bach as a teacher. And that brings us to the Toccata and Fugue, which I believe is the best example of Bach the improviser. Now notice the subject as I play it. And yes, it's meant to be played quickly, but it's also far less complex than the first example. This fugue subject is anchored by one note that is repeated, alternating with other notes in kind of a scalar pattern, like this. So my thumb is playing the repeated note. It's likely quite simple for Bach to improvise on a subject like this, and ultimately I believe this is what it was. It was an improvisation by Bach that was scribbled down by somebody who heard it, possibly Kellner, who we mentioned earlier, and was then taken and refined by Johannes Rinck and formed into the version we know today. I will be playing the entire Toccata and Fugue in D minor for the prelude this Reformation weekend. The runtime for this piece is about 9 minutes, so I would recommend arriving early if you want to hear the piece in its entirety. I hope you enjoyed this little deep dive into the organ works of Bach. I hope you learned something, and as always, please please let me know if you have any questions or comments. Thank you for watching, and happy Reformation. Bye.